Imagine you wake up tomorrow morning and every country is gone. No borders, no passports, no flags, no this side is ours and that side is theirs. Your city is still there, your home is still there, the roads, stores, schools, hospitals, all still standing. But nobody agrees on who makes the rules anymore, who protects the water supply, who collects taxes, who decides what happens when an armed group shows up from the next town over. Who owns the land your house sits on? For most of human history, these questions had no simple answer because countries, at least the kind we recognize today, did not always exist. They had to be built. Slowly, violently, accidentally. And the strange part is this: a country is not a mountain. It is not a river. It is not something you can dig up from the ground. A country is an idea that becomes real because millions of people agree to act like it is real. So how did humans invent countries? And before we jump in, if you enjoy big questions that make everyday life feel completely different, hit like and subscribe. Because on this channel, we take the things you see every day, borders, money, cities, laws, even time, and ask one question: how did humans end up living like this? All right, let's go back to a world before countries. Go back 15,000 years. You are not American. You are not French. You are not Chinese. You are not Brazilian. Those labels do not exist. You belong to a small group, maybe a few dozen people, your family, your hunting group, the people who know your name, share food with you, and would fight beside you if danger came. That is your world. Beyond it are other groups. Some are friendly, some trade with you, some are rivals, most are strangers. But there is no border checkpoint, no capital city, no national anthem. There are only places people know and places they avoid. For hunter-gatherers, moving was survival. If food became scarce, you moved. If the weather changed, you moved. If another group became dangerous, you moved. The land was important. Of course it was. But controlling a giant fixed block of territory would have been almost impossible. You would need people to defend it. You would need people to communicate across it. You would need a reason for everyone to obey the same rules. And back then, nobody had invented the systems to make that happen. The first major change came when humans stopped moving so much. Around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, in several parts of the world, people began farming. That sounds simple: plant seeds, wait, eat. But farming changed everything. A hunter-gatherer can leave tomorrow. A farmer cannot. If you have planted wheat, built a house, dug irrigation channels, stored grain, and raised children in one place, leaving is no longer easy. Your life is tied to the ground. And the moment people settled, something new appeared: property. Not property in the modern legal sense. Nobody was carrying a deed in their pocket. But people started thinking, we cleared this field. We built this wall. We stored this grain. That water channel belongs to our village. And once people own something valuable, somebody else wants it. Stored grain was basically a giant sign saying, food is here. That attracted traders. It attracted migrants. And yes, it attracted raiders. So villages needed protection. Protection required organization. Organization required leaders. And leaders needed people to follow orders, especially when things got ugly. This is where the first seeds of countries began to grow, not from a grand plan, from fear, food, water, and the need to keep strangers away from your grain. Thousands of years later, in the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, modern-day Iraq and nearby regions, villages grew into cities. Places like Uruk became packed with farmers, builders, merchants, priests, soldiers, and workers. The city was no longer just a bunch of homes. It had walls. It had temples. It had taxes. It had rulers. And it had records. That last part mattered more than almost anything. Because once a city starts collecting grain, distributing supplies, organizing labor, and commanding soldiers, memory is not enough anymore. You need to know who gave what, who owes what, who works where, who broke the rules. That is one reason writing became so powerful. It helped turn messy human communities into systems that could survive longer than one person's memory. The earliest states were not countries in the modern sense. They were usually city-states, one major city, the farms around it, and the ruler who controlled both. Think of them like tiny countries with huge ambitions. And they were constantly competing. One city controlled a canal, another controlled a trade route, another had better farmland, another had stronger walls. Then one ruler looked across the horizon and asked the question that would shape thousands of years of history. Why should I rule only one city when I could rule all of them? That question created empires. An empire is different from a country in one important way. A country usually claims that its people belong together somehow, through citizenship, shared laws, language, identity, or history. An empire is simpler. An empire says, you are different from us. You speak differently. You worship differently. You live far away. But you will obey us anyway. The Akkadian Empire, built in Mesopotamia more than 4,000 years ago, is often described as one of the earliest examples of a large multi-city empire. It ruled through force, officials, tribute, and control of resources. And for a very long time, this was the normal pattern. Egypt, Persia, Rome, the Mongol Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Aztec Empire, the Inca Empire. Human history was not mostly a story of neat little countries with clean lines on maps. It was a story of expanding powers swallowing smaller powers. Borders moved constantly. Kings died. Armies invaded. A city that was foreign one year could be part of your empire the next. For ordinary people, the flag over the palace could change without them ever moving an inch. But then a new idea started spreading. Maybe a ruler did not own the land. Maybe the people did. This is where things get tricky, because people often use three words like they mean the same thing: country, state, nation. But they are not exactly the same. A state is the machinery of power, a government, laws, territory, institutions, police, military, taxes. A nation is a group of people who feel they belong together, maybe because of language, maybe culture, maybe religion, maybe shared history, maybe because they simply decide they do. A country is usually what happens when those ideas overlap enough that the rest of the world recognizes a place as politically separate. Modern international law often describes a state using four basic pieces: a permanent population, a defined territory, a government, and the ability to deal with other states. But here is the catch. You can have a nation without a state. The Kurds, for example, share a strong sense of national identity, but do not have one fully independent country of their own. And you can have a state with many nations inside it. The United States has one federal government, but millions of people with different origins, languages, religions, and identities. So countries are not natural containers. They are political projects. They have to be maintained every day. Look at a map and borders can feel permanent. A thick black line. One color ends, another begins. But most borders are not ancient facts. They are decisions. Sometimes they follow rivers or mountains. That makes sense. Nature creates obvious barriers. But many borders were drawn after wars, treaties, negotiations, colonization, or plain old power plays. A king wins a war, new border. An empire collapses, new border. Two politicians sit in a room with a map, new border. And the people living there may have no say at all. This is one of the harshest truths about countries. The line on the map is often much newer than the people who live on both sides of it. Families can be split by a border. Languages can cross it. Trade can ignore it. Culture can laugh at it. But governments enforce it anyway. Because borders are not just lines. They decide who pays taxes, who can vote, who gets protected, who gets arrested, who can enter, and who gets turned away. A border may look invisible from space. On the ground, it can change someone's entire life. By the 1600s, Europe had spent decades tearing itself apart in religious and political wars. Then, in 1648, a series of agreements known as the Peace of Westphalia helped end the 30 Years' War. People often say this was the moment modern countries were invented. That is a little too neat. History is never that neat. But Westphalia helped strengthen an idea that became incredibly important. Rulers had authority inside their own territory, and outside powers should not casually interfere. The agreements are closely tied to the growing recognition of sovereign states in Europe. In other words, this is my land. These are my rules. Stay out. That idea is called sovereignty, and it is still at the center of world politics today. Every embassy, every passport, every argument at the United Nations, every border dispute, they all come back to sovereignty. Who gets to decide what happens here? For centuries, most people were subjects. You belonged to a king. The king was the state. But in 1789, the French Revolution threw a bomb into that idea. Suddenly, people were talking about citizens, not servants of a monarch, citizens of a nation. That changed the emotional deal. A king can demand loyalty because he has an army. A nation can demand loyalty because it says, this country is you. Its victories are your victories. Its enemies are your enemies. Its future is your future. That is nationalism. And nationalism is one of the most powerful forces humans have ever created. It can make millions of strangers feel connected. It can convince people to pay taxes, follow laws, vote, build schools, and help each other during disasters. But it can also become dangerous, because once people believe their nation is special, pure, threatened, or superior, they may start seeing other groups as less human, less loyal, or less deserving. In the 19th century, centralized governments increasingly claimed to represent the people, and nationalism became a powerful way to legitimize political power. Countries did not just need armies. They needed stories. How countries make people feel like one people. Think about it. Most Americans will never meet most other Americans. So why do they still feel connected? Part of it is law. Part of it is citizenship. But a huge part is repetition. The same flag, the same national holidays, the same maps in classrooms, the same history lessons, the same sports teams, the same money in your wallet, the same pledge, anthem, symbols, and stories about where we came from. Countries create a shared imagination. They teach millions of strangers to picture themselves as part of one giant group. And sometimes that shared story is inspiring. Sometimes it is incomplete. Sometimes it leaves people out. The United States itself is a perfect example. It was built on ideals of liberty and self-government, while also expanding across land already inhabited by native nations, and while slavery remained deeply embedded in the country. U.S. expansion displaced indigenous peoples and Mexican communities in the 19th century. That does not make the idea of a country fake. It makes it human, complicated, powerful, full of promises and contradictions. So, did humans really invent countries? Yes, but not the way someone invents a light bulb. No one woke up one morning and said, I have an idea. Let's divide the planet into nearly 200 political units, give each one a flag, a military, a national debt, and an argument about immigration. Countries emerged because humans kept running into the same problems. How do we organize large groups? How do we protect food and land? How do we settle disputes? How do we make strangers cooperate? How do we convince people to sacrifice for people they will never meet? The answer became governments, then cities, then kingdoms, then empires, then states, then nations, then modern countries. And maybe the biggest surprise is that countries are both real and imaginary. The mountains are real. The rivers are real. The people are real. The buildings, laws, weapons, taxes, passports, and prisons are very real. But the shared belief that this exact line belongs to us, That is something humans made. A country exists because enough people believe in it, defend it, teach it, fund it, and pass it on. So the next time you see a border on a map, remember what you are really looking at. Not a line created by nature, not an eternal fact. You are looking at the result of farming villages, ancient wars, royal marriages, revolutions, invasions, treaties, migrations, maps, propaganda, sacrifice, and millions of people deciding who they are. Countries were not found, they were built. And they are still being built right now. Every time people argue about who belongs, where a border should be, what a flag means, and who gets to say, this is home. Because in the end, a country is not just land. It is a story powerful enough to make strangers feel like they are on the same side. And humanity has been telling that story for thousands of years.